For those of you who are not aware, the Sport for Refugees Coalition is co-convened by UNHCR, the Olympic Refuge Foundation, and the SCORP Foundation. It was launched by IOC President Bach at the first Global Refugee Forum in 2019. The coalition brings together 80+ members united by their pledges at the Global Refugee Forum to increase access to sport for refugees and displaced people across the world. Today's event was conceived on the basis of feedback from coalition members about their current areas of work and the areas where they would like to share and to learn more. During today's discussion, we're going to hear views from an expert panel on the role of sport in delivering mental health and psychosocial support. The event will also feature the work of the Olympic Refuge Foundation think tank. The think tank brings together experts from different sectors and disciplines, working together to increase recognition of the role of sport, supporting the mental health and psychosocial well-being of young people in situations of forced displacement. In a change to the advertised event invite, unfortunately, Zainab Husseini is unable to join us today. We are very grateful to her Skatistan colleague, Nurzai Ibrahimi, for taking her place as our facilitator. And with that, I'll pass over to Nurzai to introduce today's discussion and our panel. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Kathleen. I'm really excited seeing everybody here. Thanks again and warm welcome, everyone. So just a small introduction of myself here. My name is Nurzai Ibrahimi. I am the Afghanistan Programs Officer for the International Sport for Development NGO called Skatistan. I will be the facilitator for today's session. Please just a note, if you are not talking, turn off your mic. It might be really better for all of us. Thank you. So we want this to be a space where you can connect and share with each other. So if you have insights, experiences, topic, question, or comment to the panelists, we are welcome you to share it in the chat box throughout the discussion. By the way, as some of you already did, feel free to introduce yourself by typing in the chat. Maybe state your name, role, organization you are working with, and the location you are in. Yeah, I'm seeing most of the comments here and got introduced with many of you now. Glad for that. So we will also use polls throughout the discussion today. There will be a small window that pops up on the screen and you can complete this. We will start the day with learning who we have in the virtual room with today with our first poll.
What messages are coming? Let me see. Still in the network, but I see messages coming.
Yeah, almost like voting and voting. That's nice. Yeah, it is increasing and increasing.
And the NGOs have won.
Yeah, it is like, yeah, it's more like 58% of non-governmental organizations, which is awesome. Wow, and we have like National Olympic Committee seems the second, and UN agency seems the same as National Olympic Committee. And International or National Sport Federation. Okay, the results shows like most of us are from non-governmental organizations, which is really great, following the same thing to empower children through different aspects. Okay. Hopefully everybody is done with the poll first. Okay, just 5 more seconds. Cool. Yeah, again, we have like 12% of UN agency, 58 of non-governmental organization, 12% of National Olympic Committee, and also 10% of international or national sports federation. Thanks everyone for your participation in the poll. There are the results from the first. Yeah, that's just gone. But yeah, I just read it. I want to take you through the stage and agenda for today, for the day. We will start with an introduction to the topic and what we are all here to discuss. Sport and mental health and psychosocial support. Sport is increasingly recognized as a vehicle that can deliver a range of health and psychosocial interventions. We are here today as representatives from each of our areas of expertise to promote and ensure access for all refugees to safe and inclusive sporting facilities. Many of us are here. Here are members of the Sport for Refugees Coalition. And as members of this coalition, we are pledged to increase availability and access to organized sport for refugee and hosting communities, actively considering age, gender, ability, and other diversity needs. Before I introduce our panelists today, I will be happy to share a bit more about myself. Already I introduced my name, but a bit more. Okay, I was born in Afghanistan and have been a passionate ambassador for sport for many years through my work and my personal life. My journey started as a student at Skittistan in 2008, and I have been paying it forward to other children like me ever since. Last August, I left Afghanistan and resettled in Europe, and now based in Berlin, Germany, where I'm continuing my work to provide sport opportunities to displaced children. I know, or you know, or everybody know how important it is to support children who have experienced the trauma and are adjusting to new countries and new cultures, which may be very, very different from what they have grown up with. Okay, moving on to introduce the panel for today. The panel includes leading academics and practitioners. So just going to introduce our panels. Our first panel is Peter Windwigel, is a psychiatrist and a medical anthropologist. He is the senior mental health officer at UNHCR. Our second panel is Simon Rosenbaum, is associate professor in the Faculty of Medicine, discipline of psychiatry and mental health at UNSW Sydney. Our third panel is Karen Muchibi. Karen is Deputy Executive Director at Youth Sport Uganda, which uses sport to deliver life skills to urban refugees and host community youth in Kampala. Our fourth panel is Samir Juba. Samir has worked as a training officer at Right to Play Palestine for 12 years. And the fifth panel is Natalie Mitaova, is program development and quality manager and master trainer in the Team Up Global team. So Team Up is a psychosocial support intervention for children affected by war and conflict. And our last panel is Maria Bray. Maria is a child protection, mental health, and psychosocial advisor with TDD's Homes. She is a member of the Olympic Refuge Foundation think tank. So that wraps up our panel introduction. After the main discussion, we will have a question and answer session, which will be an opportunity to ask your questions directly to the panelists. If you have any questions throughout the event, please post them in the chat at any time. And we will try to cover as many as we can in the question and answer. Okay, now let's start our panel discussion with a question for Peter. Hopefully you're ready.
I am. I'm very ready, Norzai.
Thank you. MHPSS, which stands for mental health and psychosocial support, is a broad concept. Can you ground this term for us? All, so that we all speak the same language in this session? What are we talking about when we use these terms? And in your work, what have you observed to be the potential to use sport to support mental health MHPSS outcomes?
Thanks, Norzai. Thank you for this great introduction. And as you see, I prepared a little bit. So the term MHPSS means this: anything you do, both within communities as well as what you bring from outside, that has as a goal to protect or promote psychosocial well-being, or to prevent or treat mental health conditions or mental illness. That's the definition. Now, I am an MHPSS specialist, like some others here in the panel as well. For the last 2 decades, I'm working on this. And people usually ask me what I do, and they think that what I do, what MHPSS is individual treatment. For example, with deep psychotherapy or with medication even. I'm also a doctor by training. And that is actually only a part of what MHPSS is. So I've seen in the last 20 years that MHPSS is growing. There is more attention for it, but still there are misunderstandings, and that people think MHPSS is the same as individual treatment for trauma, for example, but it's much more. So what I hope to do now is to make that clear for everyone. Many of you will know it, but not everyone may be familiar. So let's go to the next slide. I want to show you 3 pictures. It's a little bit boring, my presentation. I have 3 pictures, but I hope it will help you understand better if you don't know yet. So 3 pictures. The first one is about the MHPSS pyramid. We like pyramids in MHPSS because it shows the diversity of approaches. Now this pyramid, what I said, these individual specialized approaches by a psychiatrist or a psychologist is part of MHPSS, but it's only one part. It's the top. There you see the specialized services. But you also have other layers. For example, the layer under it, focused, non-specialized support. Many things that can be done. You don't have to be a trained psychiatrist or a psychologist. You can also be a non-specialist with some training and supervision. You can do a lot. But let's now go to the layer below that, strengthening community and family support. We know that people who feel bad because of what's happened to them and because of the situation they're in, they get, if you ask them what makes you feel better, they say it's when I'm with people, when I'm supported, when I'm with my family, when my friends can support me. So I think this layer of strengthening supports in families and communities is super important. And already you can imagine that when you talk about sport, you can have a lot of things you can do in this layer. And the bottom layer, the blue one, is basically means that you include social considerations in everything that you do, particularly that you include people with disabilities or people who are marginalized in everything that you do in your activity. So this is HPSS. It's much broader than some people think. Now, next slide. Now, what are the goals? And this is a bit the same. What are the goals of MHPSS? Well, the broad goal is to reduce suffering and to improve the mental health and psychosocial well-being. But if you break that up into specific outcomes, again, you will see more clearly now where sport can contribute. Let's start with number 5. Number 5 is the classical one. An outcome of good MHPSS programs is that people who have a mental health problem can use services. They can go to the doctor, they can get to therapy, fine. That may not have so much to do with you. But look at number 4. Another outcome can be that communities and families support people who feel bad, who have a mental or emotional issue. Here, I think you can already see that sport may play a role. Those number 4 and 5 below are both focused on the individual. One person has a problem and the intervention, the MHPSS program, helps the person to feel better. But there are also community outcomes, group outcomes. And again, this is where sport becomes interesting. Look at number 3. An outcome can be that family, community, and social structures promote well-being. So instead of refugees who are in a camp in Africa sitting and doing nothing, idle, feeling bored, feeling angry, you can actually create a place where people can feel safe and can support each other. Well, I can tell you, if you ask young refugees what they want, they say, let's play sports. It goes automatically. So I think these outcomes, sport has a lot to do. I will not go in detail into number 1 and 2, but you can read it for yourself later. Let's go to my last slide. Otherwise, I eat all the time of the others, which is not good. Again, a very boring slide. These are, and this comes from a document from the IASC, the Interagency Standing Committee. That is an outcome document that says, how can you measure whether a mental health and a psychosocial program has good outcomes? What are the indicators? Now here we have a list. And again here, you will see some are very much related to sport and some perhaps a bit less so. So the first way to see whether an MHPSS program is successful is to see whether the person is able to carry out essential activities, whether the person can become active again, can do his role or her role as a family member, as a father, as a son, as a daughter. So yeah, that could, I want to invite you whether sport could play a role there, maybe. The second one, subjective well-being. That a person feels more calm, safe, strong, hopeful, respected. That's an outcome of our interventions. Well, I think sport can definitely play a role to achieve such an outcome. And to measure the outcome. The third one is about less symptoms of mental health problems. Maybe sport can play a role here. But let's now go to the fourth one, the ability of people with mental health and psychosocial issues to cope through skills in communication, social skills, etc. I think here again, the social aspects of sport and sport activities can play a major role. It gives you self-esteem, it helps you interact with others. And that goes already to the fifth impact indicator, social behavior. If people are able to help others to be less aggressive, to be less violent, it can help. It's a major outcome and an impact indicator for mental health programs. And the last one I think is super important, particularly for sport, is social connectedness. People feel less alone, feel connected with others. So if you look at these outcomes, you already see that MHPSS is not a matter of me as a psychiatric doctor. It's a matter of all of us here. So that's why I really hope we can do more, because what I've observed is that the world of MHPSS and the world of sport in refugee settings is still too separate. We can work much more together because we have goals that are quite aligned and linked. That's what I wanted to say. Over to you, Noorzai.
Wow, that's really great. I mean, like that was answered a lot of questions that I had in my mind. Thank you so much for giving us a shared understanding about. And yeah, it is really important, like including the different communities everywhere might be super, super helpful for sure. I believe most of us already experience it. Now, for the attendees, we would like to find out if your organization is currently delivering activities to support MHPSS, as already talked about, through support for displaced young people. Please answer the following two polls appearing in the screen like the last time. Cool. It seems like, yes, we have 38, and we use sport to support refugees. We have 36, which is really high. And we deliver mental health psychosocial support is 10%. No is just 16. Wow. This is super nice. And the pool tray, please. Your participation to the pool questions are really important, and your ideas gonna be reviewed back. We have 74. So yes, yeah, it's common. Yes, about 50%, which is really good. No, about 29%. And we are not currently delivering is 21%. But it's like currently it's gonna be improved day by day. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for that. And now we will hear from more of our panelists. It might be really nice to have different ideas. And yeah, my next question is for Simon. if you're ready.
Sure, thanks. No, sorry.
Simon. From the research perspective, what can you say about the link between sport, mental health, and psychosocial well-being? How strong is the evidence from forced displacement context, and how can this be improved?
Thanks, Nuzai. Thanks for having me. I'd like to just acknowledge that I'm joining this call from Aboriginal land in Sydney, Australia. So it's the evening here. Nuzai, I'd like to probably just start by answering that question by talking a little bit about the evidence around physical activity and mental health in non-displacement contexts, just to talk to the strength of the evidence we have. Physical activity, we have an overwhelming body of evidence supporting physical activity in helping to improve mental health, including for people living with serious mental illness. In countries like Australia and Canada, exercise is a first-line treatment recommendation for depression. The challenge we have is, how do we support people who stand to benefit from this? How do we support them to engage? And how do we match the level of support to the need that people have? The World Health Organization, in their guidelines around improving the physical health of people living with mental illness, recommends physical activity as a first-line strategy. So they're just some examples to really speak to the strength of the evidence that we have. In displacement context, we obviously have some additional challenges, and one is around ensuring that we have trained professionals to meet the needs of the communities we're trying to work with. That means having MHPSS professionals trained in sport, and also having sport professionals trained in MHPSS through things like psychological first aid. And I think through forums like this, we have an enormous opportunity to bridge those gaps, as Peter mentioned. And there's some great work happening through the Olympic Refuge Foundation, bridging that as well. I think the evidence also tells us that the people who stand to benefit the most are often the most marginalized, and they're often excluded. In displacement context, this includes women, this includes people living with disabilities, and often our programming, when we think about sport, is limited to able-bodied young men and limited to competition. And so we need to be changing that thinking and really being aware of some of the evidence we have, suggesting that competition can actually make mental health outcomes worse. So thinking about prioritizing participation, inclusivity, and actually engaging as many people as we can. I will probably leave it there because I think it's far more exciting hearing from the panelists that are doing the work on the ground. So I'll hand back to you, Nuzai. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Samir. Yeah, you pointed to really important points, especially with the mental health. Like when people have the mental health support, then the other things gonna come true, you know, like they're gonna think of themselves, solve the solutions, find the solutions and solve the issues. Thank you so much for taking us there. And yeah, my next question is from Karen and Samir. Yeah, we want to hear from you and from your experience of delivering sports-based programs to support the mental health and well-being of young refugees. Just a specific question, what are the 1 or 2 key program elements that you feel are essential to get right, and why? So Karen, if you can start us off, and Samir, we will come back for your answer soon.
Thank you so much, Nuzai. So from my experience using sport for MHPSS, I feel that the coach is the most important aspect, and you really need to get that right if you're to have a successful program. So the coach could be a social worker, it could be a teacher, it could be a community person, or an MHPSS specialist who has been trained into sport. This adult who is working with a young person is very key to the success of a program. Why? For an MHPSS program to work, that ongoing relationship between the adult and the young person is key for them to open up, for them to share, and for them to learn. Only that way can they be able to speak out about the stress, about their triggers. But then also, the adult should be able to understand the triggers and be able to use the sport to help the young person. So from my experience, a poorly trained coach, an absentee coach, and a coach who's not well motivated will lead to bad outcomes or poor outcomes for your project. So from our experience, we have learned to motivate these coaches through pay, through continuous training. You know, we train them in extra skills like first aid, counseling and guidance, you know, and we have also learned that when you motivate them, then they really perform something nice. Some people don't pay them, they take them as volunteers, but we have learned that, you know, when you give them something on a regular, then they will show up and they will lead to better outcomes for the program. Thank you, Nuzai.
Yeah, thank you, Karen, so much for that. It's really important. Like when you are putting somebody to lead something, themselves gonna learn something new, how to be there, and then like moving this understanding to others might be really important points. Thank you so much for sharing that. So just moving into next, Samir, just emphasizing on the question, what do you think are the 1 or 2 key program elements that you feel are essential to get right, and why?
Okay, thank you, Nurzai, and also thanks for Karen, because she already touched the base of my input, which is that the training, the capacity building methodology that used in any sport for development program can be also one of the main elements that needs to be well tailored, well organized, and prepared. So the approach that you use to work with either the coaches or the final beneficiaries, the young people, the children, the target group, I mean, should be well designed. What I mean by well designed is focuses on ongoing implementation, not only on a short-term implementation. So using an approach that focuses on regular, let's say weekly or twice, 3 times a week, that will be a very strong element in your program, since we are talking about changing behaviors, enhancing skills, or maybe changing attitudes. So this will not be achieved within 1 or 2 or 3 scattered activities. So the continuity of the regular activities with the same group and same environment with the target group will give them that sense of stability in their daily life that will lead to the feel of safety and trying to come back or go back to their normal, regular routine in their daily life. So this is how sport activities can contribute to this part of the contribution to their crisis. Or sorry, not contribution, I mean reaction or working with them. The other point that I would like also to share with you about including the parents in your program, but not only on the level of awareness on how to, or about the importance of promoting and enhancing life skills of children, but also to go beyond awareness, beyond knowledge, to the practices. So involving parents in the sport program should also be built on tasks, roles, and even, let's say, skills that the parents can use with their children in their houses, not only in the playground, not only in the community center or child center that they are attending. from our experience in our programs involving the parents and giving them an active role was a strong element in the program. So besides other great elements that are effective elements in your programs, I would like to highlight these two. Up to you, Nurza.
Thank you so much, Samir. I will have more questions from you. These are really good reflections on how you are like engaging the parents, families, like the participants, how they're gonna learn. And it reminds me of something that instead of giving a fish to somebody, we will be able to teach them fishing to get fishes, right? So this is really good point. And my another question for you, Samir, is how does right to play involve young people in your programs and give them space and opportunities to exercise leadership?
Leadership and give them the feeling of ownership on what they want to learn, what they want to improve in themselves, and even give them, making them part of each space. We try to combine a sport for development approach with something called the experiential learning methodology. So all the sport activities, sport and play activities built on an experiential learning approach, where the children can, or the young people can, attend a sport activity, sport or play activity, and then they will have a space to reflect on what they already experienced, try to connect it with their daily life experiences, and then think about how to apply it in the future in their daily life experiences and skills. So it's not only a recreational activity, it's a learning activity where they can decide what and how to learn and what and how skills or life skills that they can or need to improve in their daily life.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samir. This was really helpful, and also it seems like depends on the location. Everybody might need something different to get used to it. But yeah, for the mental health and stuff like this, everywhere might be the same, but different aspects that they're gonna focus in. So thanks a lot. If you have time, we're gonna come back to you for and ask some more questions. So again, I'm gonna ask a question from Karen. Yeah, given that a member of the coaches you work with are themselves young refugees, what have you learned about supporting them, and in what ways have you seen them benefit from their role as coaches or leaders?
Wow, thank you, Nazai. So it's very important for young people to be at the front of any program for young people. And for us, we focus on using young refugees because then they bring out the aspect of nothing about us without us. If you're talking about issues of refugees and then you're excluding them in the leadership, then it doesn't make sense. We have come to learn that when we use the young refugees as coaches, as leaders in the program, they are relatable to the young people. One, they have experienced many of the things that the other young people have experienced, the triggers to their mental health distress, and so they can be able to share their stories. I can give an example of one of our coaches. He's called Justine from Congo. So when it came to the youth opening up about their story and what their current triggers are, he used his own story of abduction with the youth, and they found that so relatable. Everyone opened up, and the more they opened up, the less the distress that they had. But also they are acceptable. So if I am 17 years old and my coach is 22, I will easily accept and speak to them about my issues than speaking to a 40-year-old man who is past my age bracket, past my adolescence, probably doesn't remember what I went through and will not even relate to what I'm talking about, really. And of course, but the major thing we have learned working with young refugees as coaches is that they are fresh, they are not so exposed, so they will need a lot of capacity building. They need a lot of mentoring, they need a lot of support for you to be able to get the outcomes that you want, for you to be able, for them to be able to lead the group. And we try to do that a lot through community of practice sessions, which are monthly, where we get certain topics about child protection. I have spoken about first aid, counseling and guidance, MHPSS, for them to understand what exactly is it that they're delivering. But we've also partnered with our NOC, Uganda Olympic Committee, who deliver a structured training that they call Sports Administrators course. So this for the coaches is so structured that it lets them understand what it is for you as a young person to stand in front of another young person and try to change their lives. They teach them communication skills, they teach them accountability, respect, and all these values that are important for a young person who is leading another young person. But equally, we also focus a lot on continuous assessment. I have told you they're young, they are fresh. So you need to continuously assess them. And we have developed some tools, one of them which we call the coach assessment tool, that they do monthly and track themselves, see how far they've come, where they're going, what have they done right, what have they done wrong. So generally it's nice to put them at the front, but they need a lot of support. And well, when you see them grow into their role, you see that their work starts to affect them. They start to benefit from them, from their work. I can tell you, Uganda is a young nation. Over 78% of us are below the age of 30. Now that comes with a lot of unemployment. So like I have said, these coaches need to be motivated. We make it a point to pay them. And so that money goes to them for so much. They are in displacement, but they can be able to start up income generating activities. Some of them have said they've gone back to school. After 2 years of an MHPSS project, one coach graduated at the university, and that was a success story. He's a coach from Congo, and he said, this is what I can show for this project, my certificate. So we are providing employment to them, but as well as the change stories that happen in their lives. So as they deliver the life skills to the young people, they get to learn the self-control, the self-efficacy. They get to learn to respect the differences between nationalities. They get to assimilate into the host community themselves. And also, of course, lastly, the capacity that we give them takes them a long way into their role, and they grow, they become young leaders in the community. They're able to address parents in MHPSS trainings and sensitization sessions. So it is beautiful working with them. They may have some work to do with them, but it is really beautiful working with young refugees at the front of our program. Thank you, Nazar.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen. It reminds me like a lot of people from Afghanistan as well. They was like in the same situation, like everybody was using their own story, like reading about themselves, and they was thinking like everybody has their own work. And when you open, there might be like several things that you could understand from each other as well. So young coaches means like new, like expert generation for the new generation, somehow like combination of helping each other and teaching like really good resources that they were experiencing before and just moving them to others, which is really nice. And this is what we are also doing at Skidistan. Thanks for sharing that, and it reminds me of lots of things. And if there was time, we will come back to you, Karen, for some other questions. Cool, thanks again. And yeah, another my question is for Natalie from Team Up.
Hi.
Oh, cool, you're there. What do you think is the role of sport and physical activity in an emerging crisis situation, where it may not be seen as an essential or priority need?
Yeah, thanks, Nursai. Thanks for the question, and also thanks for having me on this panel. Just to explain a little bit, Team Up is an intervention, an MHPSS intervention that uses movement, play, and sports with children 6 to 18. And through playing and through sporting together, we built on skills like how to do your own emotion regulation, so how to deal with fear and conflict and maybe anger. Also how to work together, cooperation, making friends, how to be assertive. So all of these things, we don't talk about it, but through playing and through the structure that we have, we work on those skills. And your question about why is it so important in an emergency response to immediately focus on this is, and that relates to what Peter shared. It provides the sense of normalcy, of structure that, in an emergency situation, just it falls totally away. So children and well, any person, I guess, in an emergency situation, they are completely in a state of being which is not normal anymore. Maybe an example of when last year the Taliban took the power in Afghanistan. A lot of Afghani refugees came to the Netherlands, and there was an emergency shelter set up. But the first 2-3 weeks, it took a while before the structure was there. So the children couldn't go to school. There was nothing organized. So we came quite quickly with structured. So every day there was a session of team up on the same time with the same people, same faces, and the same structure of the activities that we did. And that creates this sense of normalcy where children also can be children and just feel like they're supposed to feel as children. And this, the earlier you start with such an intervention, the more it builds to the resilience of the children. So I think that's one. And the second, could be that using sports and movement also can create an entry point to connect with children. I'm going to a little bit into the theory now, but if you go through traumatic experience, you might end up in a part of your brain that is really reacting from a survival mode. So the fight, the flight, and the freeze, which I suppose you're familiar with. And that makes it hard to if you are in this mode, it makes it hard to connect those part of your brain where you can think about the future, where you can plan, where you can reason. And it's maybe an interesting example where I was in Moldova, the country next to Ukraine, where a lot of Ukrainian refugees are now being sheltered. And we did a session with children there in a refugee setting. And there was this one boy, he was 10 years old, and he just came, he entered our session, and he was completely like this, like physically completely shut down. So we started the session, and his mother was very much pushing him to come and play with us, because you see the children are having fun and everyone's laughing, and you've been feeling so sad the whole time. But he was completely stuck, physically, mentally. And at one point we were in a circle, and at one point she just pushed him into the circle, but you could see that was actually, doing more harm than good. Whereas you could also understand the mother, she was also desperate for some relief for him. So what we did is we took him out of the circle. One facilitator took him out of the circle. We always, within Team Up, we have a safe space where you can just sit. If you're tired, or if you don't like the game, but also if you maybe feel you're very angry, you can take a time out. But also in cases like this, he didn't have to leave, he can just sit and watch. And then one facilitator was with the boy, and we gave him a ball. And then slowly we started passing the ball to each other. And you can already see that only through passing a ball, which is nothing basically, but he liked football, and you could see him slowly opening up. And after 10 minutes, they were able to talk together. And after half an hour, I was again in a big session, we were using the parachutes, a big circle cloth to do an activity together. So we were all in a circle, and at one point he was next to me, and next to him the other facilitator. So by providing a state of safety for this boy, and also to connect with him, but also connecting through sport, it really helped him to open up, to feel safe, and to, in the end, join us all together, and even raise his voice to say, I like this game the best, whereas he didn't even participate in the game. So the entry point for sports, indeed, creating that sense of safety, of movement. You also be more in your body, in the moment. Sports makes you, helps you to release tension that is obviously present in the body if you went through trauma or traumatic events. Yes, whereas in an emergency situation, we might first think about shelter and hygiene, and which is equally important. But yeah, starting with sports activity and MHPSS from the start really will help in building resilience, and maybe potentially also help us refrain from doing more harm.
Wow, thank you, Natalie. That was really nice. I really love the word like do your own, which is like makes the person owner to think of different aspects and like lead the others instead of themselves. And also there are like unforeseen challenges from the people who are refugees coming, that people can't consider it like what's exactly there is, and then like after a while it's gonna be appeared like step by step. It means like, as you said, like not forcing, but showing different ways or solutions, like how we can get that issue or how they can tell us. Sometimes they're gonna have issues, but they couldn't like explain to us. So it needs to have a time to like put them in a good situation until they could respond, as you said. And then there was like, he was raising his hand and saying like, do this game and other game. So he just used it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that was amazing. So into the next point, finally, we'd like to move from discussing practice to the resources that exist on this topic. Maria, can you tell us a bit about the ORF think tank, which is an interesting name, and why you decided to do mapping on guidance and tools for sport and MHPSS for displaced youth specifically?
Thank you very much, Nusrai, for this question. And I mean, already speaking about guidance, I think I want to thank already all the panelists that I think through their sharing their experience already shared with us a lot of guidance and recommendation, you know, on how we could best actually use sports for MHPSS outcomes. So so what you can see already on the screen is actually the results of a mapping exercise that one of the working group under the ORF think tank that is looking at MHPSS and sport has embarked in order to identify actually what was already out there in terms of guidance. When the ORF think tank gathered for the first time, I mean, what was launched was a kind of survey together with the think tank members and the community of practice to know a little bit what was the expectation out of what could the think tank looking at MHPSS and sport bring. And of course, one thing that came very strongly was actually having supporting and developing guidance to support practitioners on the field in using sports for MHPSS outcomes. So naturally, of course, before being able to know what we need to develop, in addition, we needed to know what was already out there. So this is when we embark in doing this this mapping. And so, as you can see here on the screen, we can already show the results. So we managed to find around 136 resources. Maybe one thing that is interesting is that, of course, we were looking for resources that would bridge the gap and make the link between sports and MHPSS outcomes. What we can see is that actually at the end, half of these resources include both MHPSS and sports consideration, because some of them are more sport focused and some others might be more MHPSS focused. We also identify, of course, different type of resources, mainly training manual, facilitation guidance, and best practices guide. What was really interesting in doing this mapping was that we included a specific lens, an MHPSS lens, of course, looking at specific quality MHPSS markers, and some of them were actually presented to you by Peter at the beginning of this webinar. That means the IASC pyramid and this other, outcome indicator framework. And by doing that, we were able to analyze a little bit and trying to see what kind of outcome do most of the guidance today that are already issued are looking at in terms of using sports for MHPSS outcomes. And what we could find is that a majority of this resource, and this is probably not so surprising, but majority of these resources are looking at the level 2, which is actually strengthening the community and family support, which was mentioned by Peter earlier. I mean, we've got, of course, some guidance looking at the level 3, which is really more focused person-to-person, non-specialized support. And of course, this is especially relevant to the therapeutic potential of a coach, I mean, when he's got this mentoring role with a young person in sport programming that can actually have and work on self-efficacy and trauma in some circumstances. Some other findings are that we looked, of course, at some important mainstreaming approach, like the gender inclusivity of some of these resources. There we found out some very good practices, but we can see that this is not systematic. So around 24% of the resources are clearly gender inclusive. And also, I mean, some challenges in terms of the findings. I mean, challenges in actually accessing, this is how we're analyzing, accessing resources produced by the Global South, because we actually only found 5% of resources that were coming from the Global South. We also only found 14% of the resources who were coming from youth-led projects. And this is, we know, an important aspect. And this was shared earlier by Karen, of having youth at the center of the design even, and at the management and the implementation of this sports for MHPSS programming. Of course, and this is unfortunately often the case in a lot of different, I would say, field of expertise in humanitarian work, is that most of the guidance are in English. 95% of the resources are in English. And mostly also in terms of format, mostly in PDF. So not easily, usable by people and contextualize, to be able to contextualize it easy, So in short, I would say that we found many quality resources, but an issue we identified was really clearly their access and their localization.
Thank you so much, Maria, and for all the reflection. And now a final question for you, Maria, and the ORF think tank, maybe Annie. What was the output of the work, and what are the next steps you are thinking?
Thank you for this last question. I mean, you can see here on the screen, I mean, this is a little bit the final output that we have from this mapping exercise, which is actually a compilation of all the resources which were listed, looking at the different criteria I mentioned, the type of resources, the country where they come from, are they MHPSS specific, sport specific, or both? Which kind of context they were using, the age target, target, the type of physical activity, the level of MHPSS intervention. So we really try to categorize and filter all these resources into the general table. And so we have two different formats that we've been working on so far. One is a grid that really helps you to filter and search for specific resources. For example, saying, okay, I want to work at a community level, and I want to know what other resources are available out there that might be in French, for example. I can filter down this list and see if there's any technical guidance that can be useful. And another, and you have it here at the top of your screen, another format we worked on is a gallery view. And the idea here is really to have one kind of one by one, all the resources that we found. So it's, for example, if you are looking at one specific guidance to know more about it, and ideally one of our steps, next step would be to develop easy to digest briefs on each of these guidance. And this is really in an attempt at making it more accessible to everyone, you know, to know what is out there. So these tables are not completely finalized. We're still working on validating some of them and working on the categorization, because as you've seen, there is quite a lot that needs to be filtered down. So, but just maybe taking this opportunity to say to all of you that if you are already interested to have access to this Airtable, you can contact the Sports for Coalition Refugee for Refugee Coalition by email, and they will be able to send you a link. We hope, of course, to have a hosting platform very soon, which will guarantee that the table you access is really updated with latest changes and will be continuously maintained. So if we, in short, also in terms of the next steps, as you understood, so the first step is actually to have and to identify a dissemination platform to host all these mapped resources. And this is something that is ongoing and being discussed right now by the ORF. And in order to ensure accessibility also, we will be working towards ensuring what we call UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning, in order to ensure that all the resources produced are made available and accessible. Another important recommendation from the mapping and plan next step is to engage existing network to host and disseminate information and to really convene partners around a common purpose. So, and this is, I mean, for example, this webinar we have today is already a first attempt towards that. We hope to organize maybe series of webinar. We're thinking about social media package. Of course, there's a community of practice like the one from the ORF, but also the one we have today from the Sports for Refugee Coalition, potential virtual consultation and call for action. We also looking at promoting awareness of good practices. And this is what I mentioned earlier, hopefully to have this kind of easy to digest brief on each resources that will make more accessible to everyone the different resources that we identify. Of course, linked with the very small number of resources coming from the Global South, the idea is really to try to support sharing from the Global South. And for that, the idea is engaging, for example, the Global South members from the ORF community of practice to discuss with them sharing of their existing resources. And they might have also from their own partners, you know, outreaching more and more Global South members that can be sharing their own resources. And of course, another important aspect is as we identify that there are very few youth-led resources, a key action is to actually invite young people to the table. And this is again to explore opportunities within the ORF think tank youth member, ensure a greater voice from the youth in the call for action, in webinars, engage also other young practitioners to contribute to mini campaign, webinar, virtual consultation. We can even imagine that maybe the next webinar following this one could be actually a virtual roundtable with selected young people, you know, to speak of sports and MHPSS. So indeed, I mean, we, as I said, I mean, engaging in dialogue and with youth, with practitioners is actually really crucial in order to ensure we answer the different needs around this question, and we improve the quality and the number of sports activities that actually actively contributes to MHPSS outcome. And this webinar is an opportunity to do so. So I think we're going to have now as a next step a few poll questions that actually will help us even better understand your challenges, your needs linked with delivering MHPSS through sport, and also accessing technical resources, which can be very useful also for our groups to continue working on making sure we give access to most of the resources to most of the people. So over to you, Nutrai.
Thank you so much, Maria. It was a really great one. And yeah, hopefully like with the next step, these are working really well and seems like a really great plans for the next. Thank you. And to follow up on the work of the ORF think tank today, we will be answering questions in a live poll before we go into our question and answer period. So live poll question. And I want to thanks everyone again. Oh, okay, that's fine. Here is the live poll. Thank you everyone again for all your reflections. It was very helpful. So yeah, here you can see the poll. Yeah, it's increasing and increasing. Okay, we got 58% of all the participants so far. Yeah, pool 5. Cool. Seems it's increasing methodologies. Yeah, monitoring. Monitoring got 70%. That's really nice. Okay, cool.
Can we see the results actually?
Sorry?
Can we see the results? I can't see it.
Yeah.
Oh, there it comes.
I can see it. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Now you can see the results here with the pool 5. Like the most increased one is monitoring, evaluation, and learning tools like MEL. And yeah, with 63 we have training materials for sub-volunteers, which is nice. Cool. Thanks. Okay, another poll. Yeah, seems like a simple checklist, 32. One-page summaries, 48. Resources translated into various languages, 58. Wow, means like more language barriers around with the refugees mostly. Infographics, diagram, 46. And webinar and seminars, 56. Yeah, the same. No, yeah, it's changing a bit. Moodle and course, 63. Cool. That means, yeah. Okay, here is the results, and all the questions was made it, or all the predications was working well, and we have just 1% of other. Cool. Yeah, the next pool is appeared. Okay, we are almost there. Hopefully everybody could just vote. These are really important to be reviewed and to understand what people are really in need, and what's working well and what's not. So thanks for your inputs. Okay, so far we had 65% of participants, 66, and formal mechanism for active participation is 34. Formal for at some stage is 37, and informal or ad hoc is 10. Yeah, this is 6% limited, no opportunities for active participation, and other is 6%. And yeah, cool. Seems like still we have 66% of people who was voted or answered the poll. Great. Seems like not more. Oh, yeah. Cool. Thanks everyone for an incredibly interesting discussion. Thanks for the panelists for their thoughtful answers, and audience for being engaged and coming up with some additional questions or additional ideas, like others. We can think like what will be the other resources we can put to support. Now, we are going into the question and answer shortly, but we would like to hear more about what your organization is doing by answering a few questions that we did already. And yeah, question and answer. Pool was really nice appeared there, and Mustafa's were answering the poll. Now we have about 10 minutes to hear questions for the panel from the audience. Please add your questions to the chat, and we will try and get to most of them. It's important for me to mention that if we do not get to your questions today, if you have added them to the chat, they will be saved and considered in the future by the ORF think tank. Thank you. So there is one question for any panelist or other attending. Where do you feel the contribution of the sports sector, including National Olympic Committees, international and national federations and sport clubs is most valuable for promoting mental health in sport?
Nursai, I'm happy to jump in quickly on that one.
Yes.
I think the first thing is just the idea about mental health in sport or mental health through sport. And I think that they're two different things that we need to be aware of. If we think about mental health through sport, there's two things I would say. And one is mental health literacy training for our sport colleagues. And two, what I think is really important is having really clearly identified referral pathways between sporting organisations and the MHPSS sectors. I think that's something that all organisations, whether we focus on MHPSS or we focus on sport, can think about having really well articulated referral pathways with our colleagues.
Cool, thank you for that, Simon. And here is another question. It's coming from Julian. I would be keen to hear more good practices or lessons learned on inclusion of children, youths with handicap, how to balance push for inclusion with mixed groups and risk of stigmatization of within the groups.
Nizai, I can jump in there.
Yes, please.
So from my experience, we've learned that it is very important to, work with females as coaches, because then they encourage other young girls to come and participate, sort of role models, but also they help break stereotypes among the parents and the social cultural barriers that the girl cannot participate. So if they see the female coach at the ground, at the safe space, at the pitch, leading a session, they'll be like, my girl can also do that. So they will let them participate. But equally, we also encourage our colleagues to reach out to the parents who have children with special needs and let them participate. And we have seen through our results that when you let 2 or 3 on the village or in the community to participate, 2 children or 3 with special needs, then very many more parents will allow their children, to participate in the sessions. So those are 2 things. One is to use the girls themselves as coaches to allow to break the social cultural barriers and promote the inclusion, but as well as sensitize the parents and use the already participating children or youth with special needs as examples that sport can actually be a very useful tool for MHPSS of those 2 categories of youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That really makes sense. Kids are really looking for some activities instead of just sitting and telling them what they are doing right and what are the wrong and what they have to do. By activities, they're gonna jump in and do their own, as we discussed before. Yep.
Maybe can I also jump in, Nurzai?
Yeah, please.
Because I think in our program we really work with the values of we play together and there's no right or wrong. And I think sports is actually a very nice way to connect. Even if you have, I don't know, children with a disability, we can very easily change some of the rules, or we change the field, or we change the roles to include everyone basically. So an example is. If we do a tag activity, a tag game, we all hop on one leg, for example, as to include the person who has only one leg, and to make sure that we all feel that same challenge in our sport. So by changing or give a specific role to a child that cannot participate in the way we normally participate, to empower them. So by what we really do in our trainings is investing in that flexibility for the facilitator to be able to maybe sometimes change small things within the activities or within the sport that we do to include basically everyone. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Natalie. That makes really sense. So the next question from Zaidul is that I would like to know how we can measure short-term and mid-term, if possible, long-term results of sports.
So maybe, go ahead, Peter, we'll add on.
No, I don't know much. Maybe we'll say the same things. I think I would use here that framework of MHPSS outcomes that I mentioned was my last slide. So you could look on the short term, you could look, for example, at whether a person feels a bit less sad or feels a bit better, so that you could have as an immediate outcome. But I think on the end, what we also want to reach are things like social connectedness. So whether a person has more friends, whether a person is able to participate in the sport club, but hopefully also in other things, so that that person goes back to school or has a role in society. So I would say, initially I would go for individually focused outcomes that are easy to measure, like you feel a bit better or you feel you're a bit stronger. And then later on, the more durable, the more sustainable effects probably are more on the community level. That's how I would measure it. But Maria, maybe you have a different idea.
No, I mean, this was really similar. I would have really looked at really individual and collective. I mean, really, because also, I mean, what we've seen also in some of our projects is really the impact that it has, of course, at community level, but also as a collective for the group of youth. You know, there are really some impact that are individually, but also in terms of, you know, social engagement and empowerment within the community of this youth. I mean, they can be really results at different level. And as Peter was saying, both at a more emotional level, but also in terms of social connectionness and cohesion and sense of belonging. I mean, especially for refugees, this can be interesting things to measure. You are muted, I think, Nusrai.
Okay, is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Maybe accidentally happened. Sorry for that. And yeah, as you all know, like we are limited with the time, and also thanks for everyone who were participating in the answers as well. Some other answers might be appeared in the chat box that if you've seen already, and especially for the people who were asking the questions. So thanks everyone for your participation today. What a thoughtful discussion. And I know we are all feeling somehow motivated to get to work and continue our work to support those affected by forced displacement, which is really important. And all of us know like how they are feeling. We will send a follow-up email to all registered participants, including the link to access the resources we have been speaking about today. So yeah, we will be posting the video of the event online. If you want to look back at any of the discussion or share with your team and networks, that might be nice. And thanks again, everyone. Maybe waiting for a final word from Annie. No final word. Great. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye-bye. Let's all unmute and say bye-bye and thank you.
Yeah, looking forward for another discussion. Bye. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.